I would have met you guys in person. I would have met you guys in person. I would have came out to Long Island. I grew up about 2 hours from Long Island. So our business is actually in the Hudson Valley. And I got a good friend, Jeremiah, who I would have drove out here with, and we could have talked together maybe next time. So I'm in your market, basically. I know the New York area very well. So I got started in 2016. I started actually like giving this my all. So from, that beginning journey, I had to figure out how to do direct marketing. I never really started with like cold prospecting. Didn't really have a great network at the time. So like that networking wasn't really a viable option for me. So I got started by actually handwriting direct mail letters myself. And then I upgraded to a printer that I would print the letters, right? And then have to seal the envelopes. And that was a long time ago. But I've been doing direct marketing for off-market real estate deals for the last really 7 years now. So I understand, pretty much most marketing channels except for TV and radio. And we've done over probably 150 like flips or wholesale deals in that time. And the bulk of that has come from the last really 3 years where we've been like scaling our business up. So at the end of the day, if you don't want a cold call, which that is a very viable strategy, by the way, you have to really be strategic on your direct mail. And I don't know exactly the audience here, but I'm assuming that this is probably a hybrid group where there are some investors and there's some agents, and then there's some people who are agent investors, right? Which is ideal because when it comes to direct mail, you want to make sure that you're just getting a good profitable return on ad spend, which means that how much money are you making compared to the amount of dollars you're spending. So like in my, business, we look to make at least a 3-to-1 return on ad spend, which means that for every dollar we're spending, we're making 3 back in revenue. And that could be wholesaling revenue. It could be flipping revenue. If you guys have licenses, it could be GCI, gross commission income. So you got to think about it from like, how much am I willing to invest into marketing? And how long am I willing to do that until I start to see a result? And if you're a listing agent, you obviously have a way better chance of converting that lead because most people in my business are not going to take my low cash offer. So, I'm basically looking for a needle in a haystack, and I'm looking to make a much bigger spread, on a profit margin versus maybe a commission income. But in Long Island, they're pretty big. The commissions are pretty solid, in Suffolk County and Nassau County. I mean, they're not small because the house prices are expensive. So the first thing I would tell you in New York, if you're going to do direct mail, is you have to at least, at a bare bones minimum, be willing to invest for 6 to 7 months. That's at the minimum. I'd like to see it be a year, but if you're not willing to spend money month in and month out for at least 6 months, and when I'm talking about money, I'm talking about at least $4,000 a month in Long Island. You're not going to be setting yourself up to succeed. Right? You're going to be setting yourself up to fail because the reality with direct mail is that, especially in Long Island and Westchester, like I know Westchester very well, the response rate is 0.5% if you're lucky. So that means for every 1,000 mail pieces you send, you should get 5 calls. And those aren't 5 leads, those are 5 calls. So out of those 5 calls, about half of them are going to be garbage, taking you off your list. So you're looking at 2.5 leads. So, in our business, we need about 20 leads from direct mail in order to convert a house or convert a seller. So you have to understand that if you don't begin your mailing cycle or any direct marketing with the end in mind and having realistic expectations, you're going to be throwing money away, and you're just going to have the wrong expectations, and you're going to get frustrated, and it's not going to work. So if you can, number one, have a realistic budget. And I think, I'll make a change to this because if you have a license, you can convert listings, right? Especially if the seller likes you and they're just not going to take a lowball offer. So you could probably get away with maybe $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month, because maybe some of those leads that you couldn't have got to flip, you can use them as listings. So your conversion rate will probably be a little bit better. But I'm thinking a minimum in Long Island of $3,000 a month to be safe. And you got to be thinking 6 to 12 months down the road, because the thing with direct mail is that it's a momentum game and it's a timing game, right? Not everyone's that gets a postcard or a letter from you is going to be ready to sell right now. You're building a pipeline up, you're building momentum up. And what you're mainly doing is you're sending a message to the same audience every 6 weeks. And, we have deals all the time that go down in the Hudson Valley, where I had a lady, this was like 2 months ago. She got my postcard 2 years ago. And she said, hey, we just got this. Well, I've had the postcard. We need to sell this thing. The other buyer bailed, and I need to sell this thing like yesterday, and I'm willing to take a discount, right? And we turned that into like a $25,000 profit, right? from a postcard I sent 2 years ago. So she saved it. So you're going to see a lot of people when you do direct mail consistently, they might not call today, but 3, 4, 5 months down the line, they've gotten 3, 4, 5 postcards or letters from you. And they're like, hey, I've been getting your letters for a while. I've had this property. And here's a typical one in New York. I had this rental property. All of a sudden, my tenant stopped paying and I don't want to deal with it anymore. And I know that you obviously are interested in my property. So let's have a conversation and see if we can work together. So you see, you're building a lot of, almost like silent rapport with people when you mail them consistently, because they know that you're serious and they know that you're not just like one-off wholesaler who got out of a seminar who's trying to get rich overnight. They see that you're investing in marketing and you're sending them different messages, but you're doing it consistently. So that's the first thing when it comes to direct mail. That's like step A. And then at the end, obviously, we're going to have Q&A and whatnot, and we can pick this apart. Step B with direct mail is that you got to make sure that you're mailing a list that has a higher probability of wanting to sell their house. This is not like, and like I said, it's everyone's always looking for the secret list. There's no secret list, right? Especially in New York, like Long Island, Suffolk, Nassau, Westchester, Orange. It's all very difficult to get data. Like you can't, like in some markets in the country with friends of mine, they can get any list at any time and it's like right available. But in New York, it's like very difficult to get data. So what I do is we look for people. Obviously, if we can get these lists, which we have some vendors that will give them to us, like tax default, code violations, probate, pre-probate, inherited, divorce, all the, they call them the ouchie prospects. Like there's distress most likely going on, whether that's taxes, a mortgage foreclosure, probate, et cetera. So those are like the niche lists. And if you can, PropStream has some of them. I don't know how good they are in Suffolk County or Nassau, wherever I think you guys are in Suffolk out in Riverhead. So I don't know the Suffolk market that well when it comes to that information. You can definitely get probate. You can definitely get pre-probate. You can go to a company called foreclosuresdaily.com has that pre-probate list. And the big thing now, if we're going to basically understand that New York can be tricky for the niche data, is when you're mailing the broad data. When I say broad data, just more of a bigger audience, you have to go for people who have a higher probability of selling than otherwise. So what would that mean? That means, like for our business, at least, we like to target properties that have been owned for at least 15 years, right? So they have some ownership length there. We'll filter that to absentee owned because we know that somebody who owns a property that doesn't live there generally will have a higher probability of selling for a discount because there's generally less of an emotional tie with the house. And when we can stack that, when we can mail absentee owners who've owned their property for a while, at least 15 years, in Suffolk County, there's a lot of those. I mean, even in now, there's 3 million people in Long Island in 2 counties. It's crazy. So it's very densely populated. But what we're doing there is when people call us, we already know that most likely there's equity. Not guaranteed. Maybe they took a HELOC, maybe they refied, who knows? And there's most likely some sort of deferred maintenance, right? So there's some sort of value add we're going to be adding to this property if, they've owned it for a while and maybe it's an absentee owned, it's a landlord property. We get a lot of landlord properties, like tired landlords. They don't want to do it anymore. New York eviction laws are horrendous, as we all know. If you guys own rentals in New York, it's tough to get people out. And there's a lot of value in taking over a property with a bad tenant, because if you know how to solve that problem and the owner doesn't want to do it, then there's opportunity for them to exchange equity for convenience and speed, right? And then on the listing side too, it can be the same thing. Like the reason I think this group is valuable is because if somebody wants to sell and they really like you and they just are not willing to sell at a discount for whatever reason that might be, you guys have the opportunity to convert that into a listing and get some nice GCI out of that lead, right? Like I don't have a license, so I don't have the luxury of doing that. I can refer it out and get a consulting fee, but it's really not much. So you got to be really clear on who you're mailing, right? And if you're a realtor or if you're in like Suffolk County, I know obviously Suffolk County, there's the Hamptons and then there's like Shirley and Mastic. So there's 2 substantially different areas, like where one is relatively cheap, one of them is luxury houses. So you can really start to dial in zip codes and towns you really want to focus on. Let's say your niche is the cheaper area of Suffolk County, right? Then you can really kind of gear your mail towards that area you know best. So the thing I love about mail is that you can control who you send it to, right? So like with an online lead, I don't know who's calling me from Google. It could be an area I don't want to buy in, or it could be my backyard, it could be Monroe, where I'm from. So I don't really know. I can't control that. I can just control answering the phone and having a conversation with them. If you're sending out mail, I can say I only want to mail Mastic, Shirley, Bellport, Brentwood, whatever. And then when you get calls, you know they're coming in from areas you want to do business in. So that's another big benefit I like about doing direct mail. And obviously I'm not in Long Island, but if I was in my area, Goshen, Chester, Monroe, Rockland County, like those areas I know very well and I'm from there. So, when someone calls me, I know what the value is. So I don't need to spend too much time figuring out how much I need to pay for the house. So you basically, to summarize this, and then obviously there's probably gonna be some questions here that I can certainly answer. You got to have the right expectations. I would say if you're doing direct mail in Long Island, you $3,000 a month minimum. And that's if you have a license. If you don't have a license, probably $4,000 a month, because you're going to have to find that needle in a haystack. It is about timing. So because it's about timing, you need to understand that if you're not willing to do this for at least 6 months, ideally 9 to 12 months, you're stacking the odds against you in terms of having someone call you at the right time when they have a property, etc. Like if you just say, I'm spending $5,000 this month and seeing what happens, you might get lucky. We've had that happen, but you're not setting yourself up to have consistent success. Because the thing I love about mail is, let's say you're investing, $4,000 a month. So what is it? 6 times 24 grand. You invest 24 grand, okay, into a campaign for 6 months, which is a lot of money, right? That's not cheap. But like in Long Island and in the Hudson Valley, I mean, our average profit on a flip is like 45, 50 grand, right? So let's say you invest 24 grand upfront in the mail for 6 months. All right, so that's 6 months worth of mailing. You spend 24,000. Let's say within that 6 months, you get a deal and you make 30. So you basically break even. But then because you've already paid for that mail for 6 months, in theory, any other deal that comes from that campaign that you did for 6 months is basically all profit. Like maybe you have some some admin expenses and whatnot, but direct mail gets more lucrative the longer you do it, right? Because you're basically paying in advance and all those leads are trailing, right? So once you outlay that money and the calls come in, once you recoup your initial ad spend, the whole entire campaign just gets more profitable and more profitable and more profitable, right? So that's something I love about mail. Like we'll run a campaign. I'll be like, all right, our break-even number is 20 grand. So hopefully within 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we can make our 20 grand, get the initial capital back. And then anything else that comes from that campaign that we've already paid for is straight profit, right? Straight profit right to the bottom line. I have a little bit of overhead with my team, but it's the bulk of my overhead is marketing. So that's how I've always thought about direct mail. The more niche you can get, the better. I think Long Island, I know you can get probate, pre-probate. Suffolk County tax data is not easy to get. I don't know. I don't market there directly, so I don't really even know how to get it. But I'm sure if you called like the county finance, I think Suffolk is actually more town related, but you'd have to call the individual towns and see, okay, how can I get a list of tax defaulted properties? Pre-foreclosures are a little hairy. I've never really found them to be extremely lucrative because a lot of people in New York are, number one, in denial, and number two, they understand that the foreclosure process can take 5 years. So a lot of people aren't in a hurry, and a lot of foreclosure leads, you have like attorneys reaching out to them because they know that they can kind of like represent them and get them in the house for free for a while. So I haven't found the pre-foreclosure mailings to be that lucrative, but you certainly can get deals out of it if you mail it enough. So I just fired a lot of information on you guys. So questions, comments, specific, scenarios, be happy to answer that, and we can go from there.
So I know you gave like 1,000 nuggets. I heard you writing. You got all that? You get all that too? All right. So when you say direct mail, is it postcard? Is it leaflets? Is it letters? Like what do you typically mail? And what do you see the best? I mean, I know everybody asks, what's the best thing to mail? But that's a loaded question. What I guess where do you get the most traction, or what's been working best for you over time?
If you're mailing broad data like absentee owners, or you're targeting areas like that, that you're just maybe doing high equity people or whatever the case might be, so you're just going really broad, you're better off sending a postcard because those are lower response lists in general. So whether you send them a postcard or a letter, the response rate's not going to differ. And this is if you have a prospect group of over 10,000 people, right? If you have a prospect group of, let's say, 3,000 to 9,000 people, and it's more niche data, probate, pre-probate, tax default, foreclosure, et cetera, evictions, divorce, you want to try to send them a letter. But the thing is, a letter is going to cost you more money per unit. So anything under, let's call it 8,000, if you can afford to send them letters and it's niche data, you should try to send them letters if you can afford it. But if you don't have the budget to send letters, you might as well just send them a postcard, because generally speaking, the rule of thumb is anywhere from 0.004 to 0.006. So the middle there is about 0.5% is going to be the response rate you're going to get. So if you can achieve that with postcards, that's great. But some of these more niche lists, it's a little bit more personal, like we mail probate letters, pre-probate letters. They sometimes will say, hey, I got your letter. It seems like it was speaking directly to me. I have an inherited property and I read your letter and I think this is something I want to do. Postcard, I always make a joke, has 100% open rate, but a higher throwout rate. The letters, sometimes, they'll just get the letter and throw it out in the mail. They don't even know what it is. They maybe think it's a debt collector. So I've always found if you can send like handwritten style letters that like almost, it's like fake ink, but like it looks like it's almost handwritten, that can be a little bit better because it'll kind of spark some curiosity. Like, oh, what's this letter for? Am I getting invited to a wedding? Oh no, this guy wants to buy my house, right?
One the other day, I knew it was a robot, and I was like, I gotta open you. It was so good. I'm like,
Yeah.
on it. Like the technology is getting really, really good.
It is. We had a guy, I'll never forget this. We just did a deal. This was out of state, but we did a deal on Friday. Yeah, it closed on Friday. And we sent him a letter. We sent him a letter in the mail, and he got 10 letters from other investors down in Delaware. It's super competitive down there. And he said, we called you guys because we read your letter and your letter spoke to us. It mentioned that we can close whenever we're ready. And every other letter we got from other people just said, we'll close in 7 days, right? And in New York, no one's closing anything in 7 days. That's basically impossible. Basically impossible in Long Island. 30 days if you're lucky, right? Depending on the township. But he called us because our letter spoke to him directly. And it said in the letter, like, I will close whenever you're ready, which is true. And a lot of people in New York or Delaware or anywhere, they don't need money in 7 days. They want to close in 30, 40, 50, 60 days. That's the reality, right? A lot of people like pitch this fast cash thing. And, in New York, the house isn't very liquid. Like a sales cycle, if you're paying all cash and there's no violations, you're like 30 days, probably best case, which is still pretty quick, right? The mailing company that I recommend, and I don't like own them or anything like that, but I've used them and we spend tens of thousands of dollars a month with them. It's called Open Letter Marketing. They're called Open Letter Marketing, and they are in Massachusetts. So the reason I like mailing them in the Northeast is because that mail doesn't take too long to go from Massachusetts down to Long Island or Massachusetts to Westchester. So you can get the mail generally out a little bit quicker if you do it first class. There's other companies that are great out in California and, all over the country. But if you're mailing the Northeast, I like to have the Northeast company because that mail gets there quicker. They're competitive with the pricing. Like they're not like astronomically expensive, pretty much market standard. And I like them a lot because their user experience with their software is easy. You can go log in, you make an account, you upload your list, you select the mailing piece. I just use one of the templates they have. Like there's a bunch of templates that all work. And you can pretty much merge everything right on the software. You don't have to email somebody. You don't have to, get on the phone. Like you can do it all online. They send you a proof, like they'll send you like a proof. So like they'll say, okay, this is what you put in. This is what we're going to send if you approve it. And you just approve it, assuming the phone number is correct and all the information looks great. And they schedule it out to go out, whenever you want. Usually I think you have to wait like 3 or 4 business days. So, here's another ninja hack for mail. If you don't want to get smoked on weekends. I always like my mail to get dropped on a Friday, so it hits Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday the next week, so my team doesn't get flooded. If you schedule mail to drop on a Monday, you're probably going to get flooded on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and like, nobody really wants to be taking a bunch of inbound calls on the weekend. So if you're going to do mail, you should plan to have it go out on a Friday so that it actually hits the mailboxes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday the next week. Because if you schedule it out on a Monday, they're going to drop it it'll start hitting boxes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which sucks. Because like a lot of people like to work business hours, which is very understandable. And I've made the mistake where I have scheduled mail on a Monday because I wanted it to go out really bad. And, all weekend long, my team is just getting bogged with calls and I felt bad, so now it's just not productive because, attorneys are open on weekends. Like it's just a pain in the ass. So definitely schedule them to go out on Fridays if you want to get the calls in the middle of the week, which is ideal.
And so I know Rob always talks about the MOFers, right? Make an offer for immediate response. So your MOFers, I guess I know it depends on who your target is. for me, we were kind of chatting with the agent today. I said, your honey holes, which you hit, right, or non-owner occupied are a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah, and your deep equities, which is also really your elderlies, right? Your empty nesters.
Yeah.
What's a
For sure.
offer that has worked well for you for those two targets?
Absentees have been great consistently. Probates have been very strong, but they're hit or miss probates. You're either going to get really pissed off people, understandably so, or you're going to get motivated people who want to liquidate quick, right? So you're kind of going to get a mixture of both with probates because it's inherited. Like some of our best deals ever are inherited properties. That's just the reality in our business. So if you're going to mail probates, they get a little dicey. Same with pre-probates, same thing. So we've found a lot of lucrative deals from that. Tax defaults have been strong in the Hudson Valley, at least. I mean, that's a list that we can get up there. Those people haven't paid their taxes. A lot of them maybe inherited the property, they didn't pay their taxes, right? Maybe they're absentee that haven't paid their taxes and they inherited it. Like that's like the trifecta, right? That's like the gold vacant, right? Like that's like the gold, gold list or whatever. We've pulled vacant house lists. That used to work really well, but then that got like super saturated. So we don't really mail directly vacants now because like if everyone knows they're vacant, they're probably getting flooded. So sometimes we'll get like an absentee owner that we don't know if it's vacant or not because the software doesn't detect that, but it is vacant. Maybe the postal service kind of screwed up. If you're in Suffolk and Nassau, I don't know, like unless you play the luxury game, which I don't play, I would be mailing people under 700K, like or less. So you're probably looking at houses that are in between 250 if it's in real beat up in a bad area where you guys are, up to 700. Maybe if you're in Nassau, 800, right? 850, because I know Nassau's a little bit more money. But I wouldn't be mailing people like you can go on PropStream and ListSource and you can really kind of filter. Like I only want to mail people whose estimated home value is from 200, because there's really nothing under 200 in Long Island, unless it's land, up to 800, right? And then that way, when you get the leads, like you're not getting North Shore mansions, or you're not getting Hamptons mansions. You're not getting, big houses, on vineyards. Like you're getting properties that are in your like investor target buy box, right? Like I'm not mailing houses that are over 3,500 square feet. I'm mailing houses that are usually 2,500 square feet or less, right? And I mean, at least in Westchester, I mean, there's a lot of land deals we can do where there's, Larchmont, Scarsdale, Rye, like you can buy land and sell it to a builder and make a fortune, right? So that's where we'll play the land game. But up in like Orange County, where I'm from, like, we don't really play that game because you're only selling houses for 650, 700 new construction, which is still expensive, right? Compared to the Midwest. But don't target luxury properties unless that's something you're willing. Like if you want to get a listing, sure. But if you're looking to like find wholesale, like there's just the probability of somebody on the North Shore of Nassau County looking to sell their house at a discount. It's not common, right? Like it will happen once in a while, but it's not a common thing. Like you're going to see most of the investor deals, because I have very good friends in Long Island, Shirley Mastic, Wyandanch, those areas, the areas that are somewhat affordable. You know what I mean? That's where you're going to find distressed landlords. Usually you're going to find a lot of people who want to liquidate inherited properties and they don't want to mess around with listing it. Like the closer you are to the median and less, the higher probability of getting a deal is anywhere, right? It doesn't matter if it's Long Island or Dallas or San Diego, where I am right now. It doesn't matter. Like in San Diego, I don't mess with anything under 800 grand. It's not my game, and then the median house price is like 800 grand, maybe 850. So like we're targeting stuff buying in the 4s, 5s, etc. So unless you want to take listings on or flip luxury properties, I wouldn't mess with the stuff over 1, 2 in your area. You know what I mean? But here's the thing, caveat to that. You're mailing probates, if you're mailing pre-foreclosures, if you're mailing tax defaults, I wouldn't really filter that out because there's not going to be that many leads regardless. If you're pulling the absentee owner list, the unknown equity list on ListSource is golden. That's a golden list. We just did a deal from that last week. And then we had another one a couple months ago from that list, which is basically what that means is like, generally, the property has been owned for so long, ListSource doesn't know how much equity because there was never any recording on the property. So it's usually like a golden list because like these people have owned the house for so long. Nobody has any record of how long like they've even owned it. So they call it the unknown equity because they can't determine the estimated equity. So that list has been lucrative for us in the Hudson Valley for sure. you can get that on ListSource. I'm looking at this question here on Zoom. Software does he use? Luna Bond, your iPhone, what software? So, we're using PropStream to pull the broad list. We can use ListSource to pull the broad lists. There's another company called, what are they called? Listability, Listability, I believe is how it's spelled. They're all getting from the same source. They're getting from the county, they're getting from the recorder's office, and they're just bringing that data together and they're selling it, to customers.
Selfishly, I'm going to ask for myself. So my target is, absentee landlords. What is the messaging that you've seen them respond to most?
I want to buy houses as is. If you want to sell your house for cash and close whenever it's convenient for you, give me a call. Like very basic investor message. Like there's postcards on open letter marketing that like have templates, but basically the message is, I'm buying houses for cash. I'll buy your house as is, and I'll close whenever you want. That's the big, because then what I want with that message is I want ideally, I want the prospect calling me, understanding that I'm an investor and I'm looking to buy the house as is. Hopefully, a lot of people in New York are pretty savvy. They know that they're probably not going to get top dollar if they call the investor postcard. Some people, you'd be surprised. But for the most part, like if they're calling in because the response rate is so low, they generally understand we need to make a profit, right? So that's the goal, at least. If I were like going to send them a postcard, like get top dollar for your house, like, I'd probably get more calls, but I'd get more people thinking that I'm going to pay top dollar, which is not what I'm doing. But if you're an investor agent, you could maybe use a little bit more of a broader message, like, hey, sell your property, maybe get top dollar, because that could be true if you're listing it. So it's not really a bait and switch. And then if they end up being a motivated seller after you talk to them, could turn into an investor deal. So if you are an agent, I would be a little bit more broad with your message. But if you are just looking to buy houses for cash under market value, I would put more of like, hey, I'll buy your house as is, houses for cash, like cash for house is kind of copy on there. I wouldn't mention like sell your house for top dollar, because then you're just going to get a bunch of people who are going to be confused and they're going to be disappointed in the offer, unless you're willing to list it.
Sure. Anybody have questions?
I'm interested in how big is his team?
Oh, yeah.
I got 3 people. Yeah, I have a full-time acquisitions person, a full-time lead manager, and then my assistant who does like a hybrid of transaction management, some marketing, and that's pretty much it.
Are they local or are they virtual?
They're all virtual. So Lindsay, the lead manager, lives in North Carolina. Brett lives in Delaware, and then Anna lives in LA.
Okay. They're I was thinking virtual.
They're all over the nation. Yeah, they're nationwide. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Anyone else have any
We
questions?
buy, so we just as like a cat, we buy properties in New York virtually. So like, it's rare that I'll go to a house, and I go back to New York a lot. Like I'm there every 6 weeks, and like, I still don't really go to houses. I just personally don't like doing it. It's just not my thing. Just in terms of like, if I go to the house, right? Like unless they're smoking hot motivated and they absolutely want to meet with somebody that's critical. If I'm local, I'll show up there if I need to. But for the most part, Brett can do it over the phone. We can send someone there to take pictures and confirm what they're telling us is true. And I've just found that, at least with our business model, we're more effective by making offers over the phone, because we can make more offers over the phone versus driving out and looking at a house that we might not even know we're getting, right? And Brett lives in Delaware, which is another market we invest in because he lives there. And he'll go on an appointment if it is mission critical to probably getting the deal. But a lot of the times I've found that, I've actually found this, which is funny. We've bought houses over the phone and we've beaten local competition because we were quicker to make them an offer. Like they wanted to get their problem solved now, and they called 3 people, 2 people set appointments. We did an offer over the phone because we know the area very well, and we got the business over the other people who were local, which is counterintuitive. But we've done a handful of deals by actually being virtual, which blew my mind originally, but then I thought about it and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, I guess they wanted their problem solved right away. We worked the deal out on the phone. And that goes with like, we know our markets we invest in. Like I know the Hudson Valley like the back of my hand. I know values, I know areas, I know pockets, I know what stuff is worth. Same thing down in Delaware. I know the zip codes, what stuff is worth, how much construction, like with rehabs, like I generally know how much a house is going to cost to fix. I can look at pictures and I can go online and look at the square footage in the year built. And I pretty much know within about 10%, 5%, how much the worst case scenario rehab is going to be. And that took me 6 years to figure that out. So it's not like I learned that overnight, but that allows us to really be nimble and we can be really efficient with our time. And we don't got to spend all day driving around houses where we don't know if we're getting them. Cause like we used to do like, oh, okay, come meet me. We drive an hour, there's traffic, sit there for an hour and then drive back 30 minutes. So that's 2.5 hours to make one offer, where we could be on the phone, make an offer. We could make 3 offers in 30 minutes if we had to, right? So we just play the volume game at this point. We will go on an appointment if it is necessary, but for the most part, I mean, we can get most of the stuff done over the phone, and you can outsource taking pictures. You can send one of your friends there to take pictures or send a colleague or whatever. But us going to the house most of the time doesn't really add a lot of value to our individual process. And once you buy a house virtually, it's like an eye opener. You're like, wow, I never saw that house. I never had to go there. I never met the seller. And we did this deal. We made, whatever profit. And that was awesome. Like we have like 2 properties right now that we currently are either going to close on to flip or we already closed on. Like one of them we closed on. And most likely I'll never go see it myself. I have my team down there, which helps. But when you can remove yourself from physically needing to go to properties, it opens up a whole sea of opportunity where you don't need to be constrained by driving all and around Long Island to go look at properties, because it's just, you don't have that much time in the day unless, you don't have a lot of leads. So it all depends on where you're at.
That's nuts. I'm sorry. That blew my mind. Like, never go in there. I'm a control freak. I don't know, like.
Well, just because I'm not going there doesn't mean the contractor doesn't go there, or, the guy taking pictures doesn't go. Like, we're going to fact check everything, but like the contractor can fit, like the contractor FaceTimes me. So he'll FaceTime me. He'll walk around the house. I'll look at everything. But like, I've done enough houses to where like, I know how much a ranch is going to cost with a septic. I know worst case scenario, what that's going to be with the septic. Right. But if I was brand new, I would probably not do that. But like, I've done enough properties to where I know what stuff's going to cost, and I can FaceTime the contractor who I've worked with for a while. So like whether I go there or not is just kind of like, it doesn't really matter at this point. But if it's like a weird property and I'm local, like I'll make an exception, but our standard process now is not going on the appointment and actually doing most of it over the phone. And I have friends who are nationwide. They'll never see a property. I have a friend in Tampa, and his claim to fame is, and he buys in Tampa and he lives in Tampa. Everything is virtual. Even he says, I don't know if he's being honest about this, but like he said, if the house was next door, they still wouldn't go there. And I'm like, all right, if it's next door, like my neighbor wants to sell, I'll walk down the hall. Right. But, his point is like, they have their process and they follow their process and they don't break the rule for the most part, actually, according to him, ever. But, we'll make an exception to that rule if needed.
So next time I'm walking through a potential purchase, do you mind if I FaceTime you? You just give me all my numbers, just knock it out right there?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions for my dad?
I'm interested, like, with all his acquisitions, how many go to retail? How many of those are you wholesaling? Like, what is your goal there? Or is it a blend?
It depends. So we like to wholesale like half of it just to pay our overhead, which is a lot. And then anything above that, we'll either fix and flip it, or I'll keep it as a rental and I'll do the BRRRR strategy, which is my preferred method of choice. Like if I can get all these houses at the right numbers, I'd love to BRRRR everything, but that's just not reality in New York. So about half of it is wholesale. And then the other half I'll either do as a retail flip, or we'll just clean it out and list it like a wholesale deal, or I'll keep it as a rental.
Wholesale. So that's like you're purchasing it, controlling with the contract, renovating it, and then flipping it before you close?
No, the wholesale is basically an arbitrage between what the as is value is and what your purchase price is. So like, let's say you have a house and it's worth 300 as is, it doesn't need a ton of work, and you can get it for 200 because the seller's motivated. After closing costs and hard money and soft costs, you'll probably walk away with 50 grand because New York, the closing costs suck, and you get commissions and everything. So assuming you don't have an agent. So if we can just buy a property under market and then stick it on the MLS after we close, obviously, that's what we call a wholesale. That's like, I have a strict rule for wholesales. Wholesale is less than 5 grand. Anything above 5 grand, I call it a light rehab, right? So like if I'm cleaning the house out, like literally cleaning the junk out and mowing the grass, that's a wholesale. But once we start doing paint and carpet, changing toilets, that's what it becomes a minor rehab. And then anything above 25 grand is like a reasonable rehab, typical 25 to 75. Anything above 75 is like a real, like legit construction project where you're getting permits and, knocking down decks and, God knows what, ripping the house down to the studs and rebuilding it, which can get dicey sometimes.
Got it. So do you have a tip for somebody that is, maybe because a couple of things you said which were straight on, right? So direct mail is a long-term game and you gotta have a decent budget. So if you're like, let's say it's me, I'm starting out this month, I don't have $3,000 to throw at it every single month. How would you recommend I start like getting this train moving?
I would lean more towards cold calling and text messaging because that's going to be much more cost effective. It's just going to be more time intensive, right? So it's cheaper in terms of the money investment, but it's more expensive when it comes to the time investment, right? So if you want to do the cold calling yourself, I would get a triple line dialer like Ready Mode or Mojo or Call Tools. And I would, Gary Keller, I'd time block 2, 3, 4 hours a day. And my objective with that time block, and I'd probably do this in the morning, I would try to get 1 or 2 leads a day out of it and stack those leads up day over day. So that's what I would do. Or if you had a little bit more money, I would say, all right, maybe you invest in a cold calling service for $2,000 a month and have them call on your behalf for 3, 4 hours a day. And then they'll just dump leads into your CRM. So if you have no marketing budget whatsoever, I would invest in a dialer and I would spend 3 to 4 hours a day cold calling and trying to get 1 or 2 leads a day, like minimum, and then stacking those leads up and, going on listing presentations or making offers. But if you have like, $2,000 a month, I would probably invest in a cold calling company because ultimately cold calling is marketing. It's not really sales. So like dollar per hour, it's probably better spent with leads you already have versus trying to generate the leads that you want, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. No.
You got a question?
Yeah, thank you. Josh, in New York State, you can't call them.
I can.
Yeah, as a licensed real estate salesperson, you can't. So you can use like you can hire somebody like Call 10, and Call 10 can make those calls on your behalf. And then we have 2 managers in the room. Yes, it is. Yes, it's a thing. And we're going to have continuing ed on May 10th to talk about it. Yeah. So it is. We're still under state of emergency for gun violence because gun violence and cold calling are deeply intertwined. So it's ridiculous.
That's crazy.
It's nuts. Yeah. So yes.
Have you pressing calls?
That's right. I'm not gonna let
Yeah.
Sean is my business partner. He's
Right.
unlicensed. And he said earlier, I was like, should I get my license? Nope. Do not do it, right? Because he can do stuff that I can't. And then I can do stuff that he can, right? I'm like, don't do it.
So in New York, if you're licensed, you can't make prospecting calls now because of the state of emergency shenanigans.
Yeah, because it's stupid. Sorry, yes,
He's like,
that's the
"Oh,
real.
gosh."
It's been like that since April of
Yeah,
2020.
2020.
So technically, you can't make any cold calls the law says during a state of emergency, you cannot make any outbound prospecting calls under certain circumstances. Like you can call a FSBO if you have a buyer, or you can call, that's it, right?
Yeah.
As long as you have a specific buyer.
That's right. If you have an identifiable buyer, you can call a for sale by owner because they're advertising it to the world, right?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
raising their hand.
Yep.
It's funny, the home buying business is like the biggest loophole business. Obviously not giving you guys legal advice, but like in the home buying business, if you're not licensed, key here, and once again, not an attorney, you're buying something. You're not soliciting to sell your service, you're soliciting to buy something. So like there's all this like cat and mouse game with telco law where it's like, well, you're technically not marketing a service, you're marketing to buy a property, and all these TCPA attorneys are like, well, technically that's true. But listen, you don't want to get yourself in trouble either. You don't want to get slapped with a cold calling lawsuit and be jammed up in court. So if you're not licensed, go swing at it. But if you're licensed, I definitely would recommend, do that. And preferably I'd rather have people call me, right? That's just the truth. I'd rather have someone call me, preferably an online lead. Greg, I went to your website. I got to sell my inherited house. I live in Oklahoma and this house is in New Jersey. Well, a little bit easier to make that offer because they're already like basically selling themselves. Same thing with mail. I mean, mail, it's like, they're technically calling you. A lot of it's like, how'd you know I'm selling? I don't know. I mean, would you consider an offer? I mean, I mail a lot of people. You're not the only one I mailed, you know?
Luna, did you
It's
have
like
a
a question here from Luna. How you doing, Luna?
Hi, friends. Quick
Hi.
question, Greg. Two questions. What does that conversation on the phone? I'm assuming that you're doing the negotiating, even if you have somebody there, FaceTiming, even if you have like the construction guy, so he can give you a cost to cure if you don't already have it. What does that conversation sound like when you're discussing about going into contract? That's my first question. And second question, why didn't you become an agent?
I'll answer your second question first. I don't know. I just never I wanted to focus on one thing when I started, and I wanted to get really good at wholesaling and, you know, looking at it, acquiring discounted property. So I just never got the license. I actually paid for my friend to get his license so I can have MLS access to One Key. So I have the MLS illegally. Don't report me. I just never focused on it. Probably left at least a few $100,000 on the table in commissions over the years, but I guess that's the cost of doing business, but I have nothing against it. I think it's a great idea, honestly. But at this point, it's just like, I probably won't get it. It is what it is. And then the first question was, how do you talk about getting the contract in New York?
Yeah, what does that sound like to the potential client? Because obviously they're speaking to you on the phone, right? And you're talking to them about price, which is difficult. And it's at least here we can see eye to eye, right? At the very minimum. But when you're on the phone and you're discussing, let's say, a price, you know, the ideal situation is face to face.
Yeah.
So how do you do that and then say, okay, this is how we're going to do the contract?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's funny. New York is the only state where you like get your own attorney. Like everyone has their own attorney, which makes things way more complicated than they need it to be, right? Because in Delaware, we just sign stuff on DocuSign, PA and whatnot. So the thing in New York I actually kind of like is because even if you go there face to face, you're not signing a contract because their attorney needs to prep it, right? So it's the same conversation we'd have face to face on the phone. So it's, hey, Mr. Seller, are you 100% on board with everything? I want to make sure I answered all your questions and you have clarity on this decision. They say yes, which is the goal. Okay, the next steps is that you're going to send me your attorney's information, their email address preferably, and my attorney is going to email your attorney a request for a contract. That'll probably take 1 or 2 business days unless they're really fast. Once that happens, I will review the contract, make any changes that I need. I don't think there's going to be much here because we pretty much worked everything out on this phone call. And if it's something that works for me and works for you, I will sign the contract. I will send my attorney the deposit, and then you'll have the contract to sign. And hopefully we'll be in contract 4 or 5 days from now. Does that sound like a plan, Mr. Seller? Yes, it does. Okay, cool. So I need your attorney's email. What's their email address? So it's actually not a problem in New York because I can't sign a contract. Listen, I've done it before. It's a little dicey. But some of these people don't have attorneys or whatever, so you got to get creative. But for the most part, if they have an attorney, I'm not even signing them up in their house anyway. So I'm just explaining over the phone what I would tell them in person.
Okay. And obviously in the contract, since you're sometimes wholesaling, you put right to assign, right?
If I can. I mean, sometimes the attorney shoots that down and I'll double close, which sucks. Actually, in New York, you can use the buyer's money, so it's really not a problem. You just pay the transfer tax and you pay transfer tax and you pay a little bit more. But if you use the end buyer's money in New York, and like I said, I'm not giving you guys legal advice here, but I've done it and I've been doing it for years. You don't pay like double closing costs, which is a thing like people thought. Like you're not paying like the title charges. Like that's all going on to the end buyer. And you're basically just paying like the transfer tax and your legal fee, and you're walking away with like a similar profit that you would make on an assignment, which is interesting.
Anyone else have questions for Greg?
Where's the majority of your properties that you have as rentals? What state?
They're in Orange County, New York. So I have one in Newburgh, which is a city and a town. Mine's in the town, which is much safer than the city. I got 2 in Monroe, which is my hometown. I got 1 in Chester, which is a suburb of Monroe. It's like the next town over from Monroe. And then the last one is in the city of Middletown, which is like an hour and a half from Manhattan. So like if you just keep going like northwest of Manhattan, you hit like Rockland County, and then you go into like Orange County, and then Monroe's like the first town in Orange County. And then you keep going 30 minutes later, you're in Middletown. And then after that, you're in Sullivan County. So basically on like the Quickway corridor, like on like the 17 corridor, like going from New York City up to like the Binghamton area. So they're all in good areas where they're pretty expensive. So I like to make sure that my properties are in areas, number one, I understand, and they're in areas that have higher appreciation. Like some of these areas, like you see people like trying to buy stuff in Detroit, 2%, 3% rule. You might get that if they pay, but that property is probably not going to go up in value that much. So I'd rather get a little bit less cash flow and have more upside appreciation, assuming I'm buying it at a discount and it's in a good area that I understand.
We focus, ours was like cash flow, it's gonna have like 3% appreciation.
I think it's gonna make a huge.
It depends, right, anyway, whatever, we're a rabbit hole.
I think it's
That
already
was,
happening.
yeah, that was really intelligent. Okay, anybody else have questions for Ray? Because we sucked up like, there was 20 minutes of me effing around with stupid Zoom. And then the rest of it, the worst, man. God dang, it's my first day with a computer. It's just brutal. If you don't want me to lift my arms, because my pits are sweating, boy, I was stressing hard. But thank you for your time. Well, you have a course, right? Can you share about you teach this stuff?
Yeah.
All right, talk about
I have a direct mail. I don't really promote it that much. Kind of a bad salesman, but I'm just like, but I have a direct mail course. It's called like direct mail masterclass, I believe is what it's called. If you're interested, you can just send me a message on Instagram, and it's relatively cheap. It's not like thousands of dollars or anything like that. It's a couple $100. But yeah, I mean, it's like basically a deep dive in direct mail, like from soup to nuts. I share everything, like my campaigns and whatnot. But there's also a lot of stuff for free. I mean, there's stuff online. I've done podcasts on it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. And the main thing you really like to give you guys, like, I guess, give the goods away. If I had to summarize everything, it's like, have the right expectations, have a realistic budget, and follow a schedule. If you just do those three things alone, that'll get you like 80% of the way. Obviously, there's other details and stuff that would take an hour or two to explain. But you got to just be consistent and be realistic with your budget, and that definitely will get you on the right track.
No, that was awesome. Well, sorry, I nerded out there. I wanted to learn a lot because I'm a huge direct mail guy. It's part of the I shared about the zone system. If you guys are in Smithtown on that last one, I use the zone approach to real estate, and part of that is a monthly mailer. On the retail side, we're a very, very small farm. And like Rob said, he's like, go small, be the guy on the street, then be the guy in the neighborhood, then be the guy in the town. And I started super, super small. And it's finally like, it's starting to pay off. And I did that math that you did the other day in my head. I'm psycho, and my wife and I ran our household through QuickBooks. Finally, I fought doing that for like 2 years, even though my wife is fucking QuickBooks certified. I always had an excuse to get around it, but we did it. And she was like, what is this charge that came through? And I was like, oh, it's postcards. She's like, that's a lot of money. And then I was like, well, this deal up on my board came from that. And it was like 20 to 1. She was like, do more of those, it's like
do more postcards. Yeah.
But there was like the first one, and I started out with letters, right? I started out with letters, and I would fold them and stamp them and like try to save that money. And now I go into postcards. That's why I wanted to ask, because you're right, and people save them. I just did like my sellers they went into their cabinet and they pulled the whole stack of the postcards, like, shit, I sent so long ago, I forgot it was even there. And they were like, no, we've been following you for a while, right? It was just, and one lady said to me on the listing appointment, well, she said two things. She goes, I'm glad you didn't wear that stupid hat, because in my headshot I had a hat on. Oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't wear that.
Typical Long Island person, being very honest.
And she was super direct, right? But then what she said to me was, she goes, I've been following your stuff for a while, and she saved a stack of them. And she said, I figured somebody who could advertise for that long on this many properties who could afford to market like that, was doing well for themselves. So I called you, right? And that's what I said. It's like a long-term game, right?
True. You're planting seeds.
You're planting seeds, right? Exactly. That's what I call farming, right? So the farmer doesn't plant the seeds and wake up the next morning and go, where's my crop?
No,
right? It
takes time to harvest.
You said something that was really important. I don't know if that was mathematical, but you said like at least 6 months, right? Stay with your marketing, your farming at least 6 months, because it takes 6 iterations, like 6 exposures for somebody to even start to recognize you, right? So folks may not have the need to sell their house fast, but by the 6th time, if you just work the numbers, you'll catch somebody in that moment where they're like, oh shit, I gotta go. This guy's been in my mailbox every single month. He wears a stupid hat. I hate his face, but I'm calling, right? And it works. So awesome. Before I let you go, anybody else have any questions before I
Yeah,
let you
there's
go?
a question in Zoom here. I'll answer it real quick. So if you're doing like off-market investor stuff, I would mail people once every 6 weeks. That's the goal. Because you don't want to do it like every 2 weeks because it's just going to be too much communication. But if you every 6 weeks, that's a pretty good timeline I found to work.
Yeah, I get cursed out like once a month, and they go, "Stop sending me this stuff." And I go, "I know it's working." But even the stupid hat lady said, she goes, "Oh, 3 months ago I called your office and yelled at your front desk to stop sending mail, and here you are. So just keep sending it." Right? When they get pissed,
There's a good saying. There's a good saying by Dan Kennedy. He says, if you haven't gotten yelled at by noon, you're not marketing hard enough.
he's exactly right. Exactly right. So, yep, perfect.
We've had some crazy. I got some stories. Let's put it that
I'm
way.
sure.
I got some crazy stories. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. This was fun. I always love talking about this stuff. And Josh, hit me up afterwards. I got a guy I want to come out. I want to have him come out and do an in-person. Yeah, I was telling him earlier. He's like one of my best friends.
Sweet.
And he's a huge flipper on Long Island. So he definitely wants to connect.
Okay, awesome. I would love that. No, I really
Yeah,
appreciate
send me a DM and I'll connect you guys.
Perfect. And in our newsletter, we'll send out all his contact information if you want to get in on it. But thank you for your knowledge. I mean, you gave away a lot of goods for free, and that's what this group is all about. And I greatly appreciate you being with us. You're awesome.
Well, it's been my honor. I appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you guys have a great evening. And I'm a little disappointed in the Islanders and the Rangers. So I'm a Devil fan by default at this point. So I gotta root for the Tri-State. So I'll get over it, I guess.
Yeah, right. They're all like,
Disaster. I was so pissed watching those Islanders lose on Friday night. I got the hat in my closet. I'm just gonna have dust on it till October.
I did see the video. Oh man, he's not doing all right. So next time I'll do a welfare check. But all right, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you run. And
Thank you guys.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks. So we have a
See
whole.
ya.
Thank you. I have a whole slide deck that I normally look at, but we're an hour in. And really the goal here is meeting folks. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys know, we have a ton of heavy hitters. And probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met, Curtis Morrison, right in the back. So Curtis Morrison, we use him a lot. Curtis Morrison is an attorney and an accountant on both sides, and also investor extraordinaire. So if you got a minute, where I've learned the most in my world is when I pin smart guys like that in the corner. I don't let them leave, and I ask a ton of questions. But before you go, it's important to cross the room and get the card of 5 people that you haven't met. Because as we say, the power is in the network. So network, go back and forth. And anybody have a deal that they want to share with the group? Any piece of land?
Private listing?
Let's go. We can go retail, private, whatever you. Yeah.
Yes, it's a private house on Sancho Road here in Riverhead. It's got 4 bedrooms plus 2 bonus rooms, 6 baths, and just shy of an acre. It's got plenty of room for a pool. You can see the water. And it's real water, yeah. I mean, it's really pretty, but it's private, and the seller insists on it being private, but please bring your buyers asking 2-1.
What, 2.1? How many do you have? Right, I'll take 2. Awesome.